In the year 60 or 61 AD, Roman Britain stood on the edge of annihilation. The province had been conquered less than 2 decades earlier. When Emperor Claudius ordered the invasion in 43 AD, Roman legions crossed the Channel and began absorbing the island into the empire. Roads were carved through forests, forts rose over tribal lands, and new cities, most notably Londinium, began to flourish under Roman administration. But beneath this thin layer of civilization, resentment burned. Among the tribes of eastern Britain lived the Iceni, a proud Celtic people inhabiting what is now Norfolk. Their king, Prasutagus, had ruled as a client king under Roman authority. It was a fragile compromise. He retained nominal power, but Rome controlled the real levers of wealth and military force. When Prasutagus died, he made what he believed was a diplomatic decision. In his will, he left his kingdom jointly to his daughters and to the Roman emperor, hoping this gesture would preserve peace. Rome saw it differently. Rather than honor the arrangement, Roman officials moved swiftly to annex Iceni territory outright. The procurator of Britain, Catus Decianus, ordered the confiscation of tribal lands. Wealthy Iceni nobles were stripped of their estates. Loans that had once been extended generously by Roman financiers were suddenly called in with brutal urgency. Soldiers were sent to enforce compliance. Then came the humiliation that would ignite a rebellion. Boudica, widow of Prasutagus and queen of the Iceni, protested the Roman seizure. For her defiance, she was publicly flogged. Her daughters were assaulted by Roman soldiers. Tribal leaders were enslaved or executed. The message was clear. Rome did not negotiate with conquered peoples. Rome commanded. But Rome misjudged the fury it had unleashed. Boudica was no ordinary widow. Ancient sources describe her as tall, fierce, with long red hair cascading below her waist. She wore a torque of gold at her throat and carried herself with commanding authority. To her people, she embodied both queen and warrior. In her rage, she became a symbol. The Iceni were not alone in their suffering. Neighboring tribes, particularly the Trinovantes, had also endured Roman oppression. Their lands had been seized for the establishment of Camulodunum, a Roman colony populated by retired legionaries. The colonists treated the Britons with contempt, driving them from their homes and enslaving them in their own country. A grand temple to the deified Emperor Claudius dominated the settlement, an architectural declaration of Roman supremacy. Resentment turned to rebellion. While the Roman governor of Britain, Gnaeus Julius Agricola, was still a junior officer, but the actual governor at this time was Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, an experienced commander. Suetonius was campaigning in the west, attacking the stronghold of the Druids on the island of Mona, modern Anglesey. The Druids were spiritual leaders and symbols of resistance. Their destruction was meant to cement Roman control. Instead, it left the east vulnerable. Boudica seized the moment. She rallied the Iceni and Trinovantes, and soon other tribes joined the uprising. Warriors gathered in massive numbers, men armed with spears, swords, shields of wood and leather. They painted their bodies, swore oaths to their gods, and prepared for war. Their first target was Camulodunum. The Roman colonists were unprepared. They had few defensive walls, trusting in Roman dominance to protect them. Appeals for reinforcements were sent, but help was minimal. When the Britons descended upon the city, they came like a storm. Camulodunum fell quickly. The temple of Claudius became a last refuge for Roman defenders, but it too was overrun after a desperate siege. The city burned. Colonists were slaughtered. Roman authority trembled. When news reached Suetonius Paulinus, he faced a grim decision. He could attempt to hold every settlement or consolidate his forces and strike decisively. He marched east with what troops he could muster, including the hardened veterans of Legio XIV Gemini and elements of Legio XX Valeria Victrix, but he did not have enough men to defend every city. Londinium, though prosperous, was not yet fortified. Suetonius assessed the situation coldly. With perhaps 10,000 disciplined soldiers against an enemy that could number over 100,000, he could not afford to be trapped within walls. He abandoned Londinium. The evacuation was chaotic. Some civilians fled with the army. Others stayed behind, believing Rome would return. When Boudica's forces arrived, they showed no mercy. Londinium was burned to the ground. Archaeological layers of ash still mark the destruction. Men, women, and children were killed indiscriminately. Verulamium suffered the same fate. Ancient historian Tacitus later estimated that some 70,000 to 80,000 Romans and pro-Roman Britons were killed in the uprising's early phase. Whether exaggerated or not, the scale of devastation was immense. The rebellion seemed unstoppable. Yet Suetonius Paulinus was not defeated. He retreated north along the Roman road known as Watling Street, seeking terrain that would negate the Britons' numerical advantage. Somewhere along this road, its exact location still debated today, he found his battlefield. The site was carefully chosen. Behind the Roman army rose a narrow defile, perhaps a wooded gorge or hill, preventing encirclement. In front stretched an open plain. The Britons, confident in their superiority, massed across the field. Boudica addressed her army from a chariot. Her daughters stood beside her. She spoke not as a monarch seeking conquest, but as a mother demanding vengeance. She reminded them of Roman cruelty, of whippings, of violated daughters, of stolen lands. She called upon their gods. She told them that victory would mean freedom and defeat would mean slavery. Across the field, Suetonius Paulinus delivered his own speech. He warned his soldiers not to fear the noise and numbers of the enemy. He emphasized discipline. The Britons, he said, lacked armor, formation, and tactical unity. If the Romans held their line and struck with precision, victory was assured. The Roman formation was classic and deadly. Legionaries stood in tight ranks, shields overlapping, pila, heavy javelins ready to be hurled. Auxiliary troops guarded the flanks, cavalry waited behind, poised for pursuit. The Britons filled the horizon. Behind their warriors, they had assembled wagons in a semicircle, carrying families who had come to witness what they believed would be Rome's destruction. The battle began with sound. War horns, drums, and thousands of voices shouting defiance. Then the Britons charged. They rushed forward in a vast wave, eager to overwhelm the smaller Roman force. But as they closed distance, the Roman line held steady. At the perfect moment, Suetonius gave the order. Thousands of pila were launched in coordinated volleys. The heavy iron-tipped javelins tore into the charging Britons. Many shields were penetrated, the iron shank bending on impact, rendering shields useless and cumbersome. Warriors fell in heaps. The Britons pressed on, but their momentum faltered. Then the Romans advanced in wedge formation. Legionaries drove forward methodically, stabbing with short gladius swords. Unlike the longer Celtic blades designed for slashing, the gladius excelled in close quarters. Each Roman soldier fought as part of a machine, disciplined, trained, relentless. The narrow terrain compressed the Britons, preventing them from using their numbers effectively. Chaos spread through their ranks. When the Briton advance stalled, Roman cavalry swept around the flanks. Panic turned to rout. The retreat became a slaughter. With wagons blocking the rear, Briton warriors had nowhere to escape. Families watched in horror as the army collapsed. Ancient accounts claim 80,000 Britons were killed, compared to only 400 Romans, figures likely exaggerated but indicative of overwhelming Roman victory. Boudica's fate remains uncertain. Tacitus writes that she took poison to avoid capture. Cassius Dio suggests illness claimed her. Either way, she vanished from history soon after the battle. The rebellion was crushed. In the aftermath, Roman reprisals were harsh. Villages were punished, lands confiscated. Yet Rome also recognized its errors. Excessive cruelty nearly cost them the province. Administrative reforms followed, and governance became more measured. The Battle of Watling Street ensured that Britain would remain Roman for nearly 4 centuries more. Yet Boudica's legacy endured. To Rome,